Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another episode of Kast, and today we're going to be talking about Dark Souls. With the release of Dark Souls 3 and the amount of time that I've spent playing it up until this point to get a decent idea of what the game is about, as well as the fact that Hidetaka Miyazaki has mentioned that this is the last in the Souls series, I figured we should do a video, talk a little bit about which one I personally think is best, and kind of how I rank them in a certain order and whatnot, because it's been a video that I've been sitting on for quite some time. I just wanted to make sure of how I felt in terms of Dark Souls 3, because I kind of made the mistake of talking about Dark Souls 2 all those years ago when I was still in the honeymoon stage of the game, and that greatly, how should I put it? That greatly influenced my my opinion of the game, because I tend to always get enthralled by Souls games and completely consumed by them whenever they come out. And again, there's that honeymoon stage where just like everything is new and amazing. But once you've gone through it all, what is really there? You know, what's the real deal? And I kind of feel that I'm at a stage right now where I'm comfortable ranking up all of these Souls games that I've played so far, multiple times, I might add, by the way, and talk a little bit about all of this stuff. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and give out the shout outs to the new patron members, who are Yukimaru's, Satik, Andrew Bagnall, and Jeffrey Chen. Thank you very much for your support. I believe that Yukimaru's is also a supporter on the YouTube sponsorship program for my live stream, so thank you very much for all the support. You guys are the ones that allow me to keep the channel going, and provide you with entertainment for as long as I possibly can. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, now back onto the meat of the show. Now, before we get started with all this, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this video that I'm doing right now is what you would call an opinion piece, and it does not mean that you should take what I'm about to say as fact, because what I'm about to tell you might contradict to what is your personal taste, and that's okay. It's okay if we have completely different tastes when it comes to Soul games. Nobody's going to get themselves killed over it, and nobody's really going to get upset. This is my opinion and how I feel after having played all of these games multiple times, because it is a question that I get asked a lot in my live streams, like, do you like this one more than the other one and whatnot? So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to start from the bottom to the top. So the first game that I say is going to be the one that I consider to be kind of like the weakest in the Souls franchise, and so on and so forth. We'll climb up all the way until what I consider to be the best one. How should I put this? Yeah, the thing about this list as well is that don't take the fact that one of the Souls games is further down the list as a negative, as in, oh, you didn't like this Souls game, because I can tell you right now, I've greatly enjoyed my time with every single Dark Souls game that I've played. So there's no like, oh, you shouldn't get this one, but you should get this one. It's like, these are different experiences in a way. I mean, they're very similar in terms of gameplay and all that, but at the end of the day, each of them has their own pacing, their own way of play, and they provide people with different experiences. So some people might like one more than the other, but this is my list, and you're going to have to deal with it. So let's get started. Coming in at number 5. Wow, this almost sounded like one of the top 10 videos I used to make for TGN. Coming in at number 5, we have Dark Souls 2. I don't think this is a surprise for anyone. I mean, hands down, Dark Souls 2, even though it is a good entry in the Souls franchise, in my opinion, it is definitely the weakest entry in the Souls franchise. And majorly, that boils down to the level design, which is extremely linear for most of it, and it overstays its welcome in a lot of aspects. And once you add all of the DLC on top of it, it just gets even worse. Because like, one of the things that nowadays kind of keeps me from going back to Dark Souls 2, I mean, I want to eventually go back there because I haven't gotten the Platinum Trophy on the PlayStation 4 version. I have like the Platinum Trophy on the PlayStation 3, but not on the PlayStation 4, and these are separate trophies. So I'll eventually go back there. All I have to do is like finish the game twice or something. It's just, it's just still quite a time commitment. There's so many other interesting things that have come out since then that my attention span is just drifted onto all these other games that I kind of don't feel like going back to Dark Souls 2. But anyway, the whole thing about it overstaying its welcome is like, if you wanted to go back to Dark Souls 2 now and play through the entirety of it, you know, the actual game plus all of the DLCs, because there's 3 different pieces of DLC, and then there's all these optional encounters that you can do, and you have to do all these optional things to get the dialogue so that you can, get Alva or something. There's a lot of stuff to do in that game, so there's definitely a lot of content, and once I went through it once I went through it multiple times. Nowadays, I just kind of don't feel like going through it, particularly because of the pacing of the combat. I think the pacing of the combat is what screwed me over the most, as well as the fact that when you locked onto people, your character was like he was walking on molasses. It was not very. It was not as good as the other Souls titles, so to speak. So that's where I rank Dark Souls 2 at number 5. But again, still think it's a good game. And if you've played through everything else in the Souls series and you're curious about it, you can still play Dark Souls 2. It's fine. It's a fine game for even for a first playthrough, because like your first blind playthrough of a Souls game is always amazing, in my opinion, because it's always a fresh experience. It's always something new that you're trying out and doing. You're just like exploring the world and figuring stuff out. And I liked it. But again, it's number 5. Now, the next game that I'm going to mention, the next 2 items on the list, they're very, very close together. Like, I could almost easily see myself just like whenever I'm in a different mood or something, I could easily see myself, I feel more like playing this one instead of the other one, But yeah, on number 4, I'm going to have to put Demon Souls. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to want to like cut me and kill me and destroy me and do all of these things. But at the end of the day, Demon Souls is what I would put on my number 4. Now, I love Demon Souls. It is the game that got me into the Souls universe, because after I was done with Demon Souls, I was just like so ready for Dark Souls. Like the second I was done with Demon Souls, I was just like, I need Dark Souls. I need it now so that I can play more of this genre, because I grew so fond of it. And as a matter of fact, Demon Souls is also one of the reasons why I bought a PlayStation 3 as opposed to an Xbox 360 back in the day. It was Demon Souls, God of War, and Wipeout. Those were the 3 things that made me want to get a PlayStation 3 instead of the Xbox 360, if you guys are curious. But Demon Souls brought me into this world. It was a friend of mine who kind of got me into it. And shortly after he got me into it, I completely surpassed him. I finished the game and then created another character to play with him and stuff like that, and just did a ton of builds. Like I did the Blue Blood Sword build. I did the build where you get just crap tons of endurance to wear the heaviest armor in the game. I did the build for the Moonlight Greatsword. I did tons of builds in that game. And to this day, I still think it's an amazing game. It's an amazing title. Now, the reason why it comes in as number 4 is because it has potentially what I would consider to be the worst upgrade system in the Soul series. Then again, it was the first. But it's so convoluted in a way, because you have these really original concepts, like the world tendency concept and stuff like that, right? That stuff is amazing. But in practice, it doesn't really work, because what tended to happen was like the really cool stuff would usually happen in full black tendency or full white tendency. But whenever you're playing online, it's just like you can't achieve those 2 unless they're running some kind of event on the servers, because the whole world was balanced around what players were doing. So instead of actually ever achieving, and I'm talking about online, instead of actually ever achieving pure white or pure black, you would usually end up somewhere gray in the middle. So you would end up missing out on the most important events. If you really wanted to get to the most important stuff of the whole world tendency stuff, what you would have to do is play offline, which would kind of suck, because it would segregate the community and would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole messaging system and all that other stuff. So it was this really original concept that I kind of feel wasn't polished enough to so that people could really take advantage of it. But on top of the whole world tendency stuff, there was also Again, the upgrade system is just weird as hell because, like, okay, so you can get this one sword. If the thing is pure white and you fight this boss and you win on the first try, at least I don't know if it was the first try, if it had to be the first try, or if it could be on the second try. I'm talking about the Ancient Dragon. It's been a while since I played Demon Souls, by the way. But yeah, and then you would get this amazing sword, right? And you're like, awesome, sweet. And then there's like this other thing was like, oh, if everything is pure white, then you can go and you can get this amazing overpowered shield earlier in the game. But again, stuff has to be pure white, you know? And this door will be open if stuff is pure white. Or this door will be closed if stuff is pure black. And I keep talking about the upgrade system, and somehow I keep getting distracted by the world tendency, because those two things are kind of together in a way. But essentially, like, you would have weapons like that sword that I was talking about, which required no upgrades. Essentially, it's like you pick that weapon up, boom, what you see is what you get. Then you had other weapons that you would have to upgrade all the way to like plus 10. Was it plus 10? No. In the Demon Souls, it was on intervals of 3, so I'm assuming it would be at plus 9. I'm not even sure I've ever upgraded a weapon all the way in Demon Souls. That's another thing. But yeah, and then you would have all these different materials, which you also have in the other Dark Souls series. But you would have way too many different materials to kind of understand all of these things. Like, oh, this one is for sharp weapons, which will do bleeding or poison. This one will do that. And there was too much. It was way too convoluted, and you would have to look stuff up online. And yeah, and then there was also like the Blue Blood Sword, which is just like, oh, you get this broken ass sword, and then you just, what did you have to do to even get it? You had to get the broken sword, and then you traded it with something, or you dropped it somewhere. No, you would infuse it with the soul of one of the bosses. So like, you get a broken sword, you kill a boss, and it was the Valley Defilement boss, if I'm not mistaken. You go to the blacksmith, boom, and you get a Blue Blood Sword, and you can't upgrade it. You see, that's the thing. It gets really confusing, the fact that there were a lot of weapons in that game that you just couldn't upgrade. At least in my opinion, I thought that was kind of confusing. Then again, to some people, maybe that just makes it more unique. But in my opinion, it makes it so that the replayability of the whole thing gets a little bit confused in my head. I don't know. Either way, amazing game, and it is Souls history. So if you're a fan of Souls, I kind of feel like you have to play Demon Souls. Like, maybe you don't have to play Dark Souls 2. If you feel like there's a lot of negative feedback from the community about Dark Souls 2, so maybe you don't feel like you should play Dark Souls 2. That's fine. Demon Souls, you should definitely play Demon Souls, because even from a story perspective and stuff, it's amazing. And I really liked it. But yeah, it's number 4 on my list. Number 3, now stuff is getting really heated up, and a lot of people are going to be like, oh, what's number 3? What's number 3? Number 3 is actually Dark Souls 3. And I've been thinking a lot about this, going back and forth, and I really like Dark Souls 3. I think it's an amazing game, but at the same time, I kind of feel that I'm burnt out on Dark Souls. And that's why I kept telling you guys, as Dark Souls 2 came out, and I was like, oh, I hope there isn't a 3. And as 3 was coming out, I'm like, please don't make it so that there's not a 4. And this is why, because I'm personally getting burnt out of the Souls games. And I understand that there's a lot of people who will be playing Dark Souls until the end of their days, and I'm probably going to be one of them. I'm going to continue to play Dark Souls. Like, I'm still doing the RuneSmith playthrough, all that stuff. That's still going on. It's still happening. But I just want to make you guys aware that I am a little bit burned out of the Souls series. It's just a fact at this point. And there's no way that I will even be able to hide it, because you guys will be able to see as we make more and more videos. Excuse me, that sometimes I'm just like, I feel like I'm a little bit bored of it. And of some stuff, like in the RuneSmith playthrough, when I started going through the limitations of the faith build, I was just like, oh man, I just don't want it like that. That's why there's that one episode where I'm like, I don't even want to play this character anymore. I'm done, you know? And there's a lot of things Dark Souls 3 does right. Particularly, I love the combat. I like the fact that you can charge your R2s. I love the dual wielding. I like it way more than I ever liked dual wielding on Dark Souls 2. And I understand that a lot of people are like, no, but power stancing and this and that and the other. And I'm like, dude, take your power stancing and friggin' keep it. I don't give two craps about power stancing. That thing was a hassle. And you can tell me that your lead hacksaw PvP, whatever the hell, you're amazing at it and you can pull out your weapon. I just think it's boring. I'm sorry, like coming out with all these things and then you're like, oh, I need to pull out a shield now. Well, fuck, you're done. You know, oh no, you can put that stuff on and increase your weight, and it's a hassle. I'm sorry, power stancing, hassle. The way Dark Souls 3 did it, 100 times better. Easily 100 times better, in my personal opinion. Again, just remember, this is all my personal opinion. And I like the dual wielding. What I don't like is the fact that the twin axis moveset is the spin of disappointment. Come on, it deals no damage. Come on, let's be honest here. I can like charge a player and like start spinning around, even break his guard, and I'm not dealing any damage. And it's very sad. And you guys might be wondering, oh, that's because you're doing Faith and Lightning and all. No. Listen, I have a character that is like quality build, which is like the maximum physical damage you can squeeze out of something. Because I put the whatever the thing is that makes weapons start scaling quality wise, so that it maxes out the scaling. And in that character, that weapon still deals pitiful damage, and it's very disappointing. But beyond that, you know, Dark Souls 3, amazing game. I think it's one of the most accessible Souls games. So if you're starting out on the franchise and you don't know, oh, I'm not sure if I'll understand the mechanics or not, Dark Souls 3 is probably the easiest one to get into. And at the same time, it's probably the most complex one too. So that I find that to be interesting. So it has a lot of new mechanics, but at the same time, I kind of feel like it's the easiest one to kind of get into, to understand the lore of what's going on and all of those mechanics. I kind of just feel that it does them right. The one mechanic I feel is maybe a little bit convoluted is hollowing. Because like it took me a while to understand what the fuck is happening with this hollowing shit. What the hell is going on? And you guys can see if you watch my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3, you guys understand that like I was super confused by the hollowing. I'm like, I just keep getting more and more hollow. And why? I don't get it, you know? But yeah, Dark Souls 3, number 3 spot. I'm going to keep playing it for a while. But yeah, I can't put it any higher up on the list because I feel that the next 2 games that we're going to be talking about are better. And now, onwards. Oh yeah, a couple more things about Dark Souls 3 that I would also like to bring up that make it my personal. There's like a personal reason, more personal reasons beyond what I've just told you guys here, and one of those that I've voiced multiple times is the fact that I feel like Faith is just not good in Dark Souls 3. Like, you could do Faith builds. At least I did them in Dark Souls 2. I believe they've been nerfed to the ground since then. But you could do Faith builds and kind of play them similarly the way that you play like an offensive spellcaster. And I kind of like that. I like the Faith spellcasting because, you know, to me, one of the things about these games is the animations, and I never liked the fact that, like, oh, I'm this spellcaster, and here's what I do. This is my magic wand. I'm like, pew, pew, pew. You know, I never liked that. So I like the concept of having a character that could, like, grab lightning and throw lightning at the enemies, and I thought that was cool. And in this game, like, lightning spear is garbage, hands down. Great lightning spear may be good, but you're going to get it, like, almost at the end of the game. And then Sunlight Spear might be great, but you're going to get it after you kill the final boss, you know? It's like, so I'm going to make this thing that's going to be great when I finish the game. At that point, I finished the game. Sure, it's going to be great when you do New Game Plus, but I mean, come on, you know? It's a little bit disappointing. I mean, you could at least get by with a couple of Lightning Spears in Dark Souls 1, and even Great Lightning Spears were not that hard to get. Whereas Great Lightning Spears in Dark Souls 3 take quite a while longer to get because don't you need to have like 30 sunlight medals or something? It takes a while. Let's just put it at that. It takes a while to get those. Either way, yeah, that's another one of the reasons. Just like and that friggin' seriously. Oh my god, I could rant about Faith in Dark Souls 3 like all day long because like I'm sorry, what's the deal with the blessed infusion in Dark Souls 3? I mean, come on. That thing, you know, if the spin in the winged twin axes is the spin of disappointment, the blessed infusion, you're infusing disappointment into your weapon. That's what you're doing. You're effectively nerfing your damage, and the benefits you gain from the regen, garbage. Sorry, garbage. So yeah, whenever Hengist made fun of me in our playthrough in Squadron, and he was like, oh yeah, that fate scaling, man. He was right. He was 100% right. I just didn't know any better back then, but he was right. Seriously, faith scaling with Blessed? Don't even try it. Just forget about it. Forget it even exists. Like, I'll tell you what, and here's what I did on the Runesmith build for those of you that aren't following the Runesmith. I have a set of weapons that are enchanted with lightning. That's great. Works good for faith and all that stuff. And, then you're going to get into bosses that are resilient to lightning, so you're going to want another set of weapons. Chaos. Chaos will deal more damage than Blessed. And Blessed is like the faith. It's the faith enchantment. Like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just extremely disappointed with the way they handled faith in Dark Souls 3. And that is another one of the reasons why it lands on number 3. Anyway, let's talk about number 2, shall we? Number 2 is Bloodborne. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious. The way the list was forming up, that Bloodborne was going to be number 2. And why Bloodborne and not Dark Souls 3? Because Bloodborne is a new IP, and Bloodborne changed the fundamental mechanics of Dark Souls. Even though some people who don't play a lot of Souls games are like, oh, it's another one of those Souls games. It's like, those of us who do play Dark Souls, we understand that Bloodborne was a fundamental change in the way that you play a Souls game. And I loved it. And I think it was so much fun. And when I look back to it, like right now, if I was to think like, okay, I'm going to play a Souls game right this second, which one would I rather play, Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne? It would probably be Bloodborne. Because, I've played a ton of Dark Souls. I've only played one Bloodborne. And the Bloodborne game, the fact that it's a new IP, that it does so many new things, even though it has less weapons, sure, has has a lot less customization of your character, sure, but it's a completely different play style. And it just had a really great atmosphere, even though I'm not a huge fan of the whole Victorian setting thing and all that stuff. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the boss fights. And there was a lot of stuff that they took from Bloodborne and put into Dark Souls 3. Like the pacing of the combat is improved quite a bit in Dark Souls 3 because of Bloodborne. There's the boss staggers that you can do in Dark Souls 3 that you couldn't, I don't think you could do in Dark Souls 2. I'm actually not sure. It's been a while since I played Dark Souls 2. But there's also the bosses that have the staggering mechanic where you can capitalize by critical hits and doing all this stuff. And not even critical, they're called visceral hits, whatever the hell you want to call them. But I thought it was great. I thought the story was great. I thought the weapons that you had in that game, even though they were less, they were more meaningful because each weapon had a distinctive move set and a distinctive amount of things that you would use that weapon for. And it was extremely satisfying. And the customization with the gems, almost like Diablo 3 socketing, amazing. And then you still have the randomly generated levels, which not my favorite thing, but they do extend the game's replayability to a lot longer than you would get out of you just playing through the game once. So there's a lot in Bloodborne that I've enjoyed more than I've enjoyed in Dark Souls 3. Even though if you were to ask me this question when I was like, in the first week that I started playing Dark Souls 3, I'd be like, hell no, dude, Dark Souls 3, best Dark Souls of all time. But now that I've kind of played enough that I was able to distance myself from it, Bloodborne is definitely, in my opinion at least, better than Dark Souls 3. Again, personal opinion. If you don't agree, that's fine. Type it in the comments. Just be civil about it. Let's not start a friggin' pissing contest because I like Bloodborne more than Dark Souls 3, because I would hate to start that. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, oh, but Bloodborne, it's console exclusive, doesn't count, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, I'm sorry, guys. I understand that it's fucked up that a lot of people didn't get to play Bloodborne because they don't own a PlayStation 4. Like I said, it's fucked up. And I'm sorry about that. But that doesn't change the fact that I like that game more than Dark Souls 3. It's just the fact of the matter. And then obviously the best one in the whole series to me is still, and I think is always going to be, Dark Souls 1. I mean, Dark Souls 1 was the first one that really grabbed me because it had a better upgrade system than Demon Souls. Even though it was far from perfect, like the upgrade system in Dark Souls 3, it's the best one in the series. Hands down. It's the best one. Because it's got tons and tons of variety, tons and tons of things that you can do with your weapon. So if you're talking about upgrade systems, Dark Souls 3, with a bullet, it's the best upgrade system that you have in a Souls game. But Dark Souls 1 was the one that really began it. And Dark Souls 1 has a lot of variety in the builds that you can do. But most importantly, I think that Dark Souls 1 has the most variety of starter weapons that you can get early in the game from any other Souls game. And that's exactly what I like about it. Because, I mean, let's be honest here. You're starting to play Dark Souls 1. Let me tell you just a couple of the weapons off the top of my head that you can get pretty early on. Like, let's say even before Taurus Demon or shortly after Taurus Demon, shortly after the Gargoyles, around those levels. So super early on. You can get the Grave Lord's Greatsword, which is great if you're starting a strength build. You can get the Drake's short sword, whatever it's called. I don't even remember. Is it just Drake's sword? The one that you get from chopping off the tail of the Hellkite dragon on the bridge. You can get that one, which is also a pretty good filler weapon until you get whatever weapon you want. You can get the Sword of Astora, which is not the best. Arguably, it's one of the worst weapons late game. But to start a Faith build, it's awesome. Awesome weapon to get. You can get the Great Scythe. Without even killing a single boss, you can get the Great Scythe. You can get the Zweihander. Right? It's right there at the start of Firelink Shrine. You can get the Zweihander. The Winged Spear. You can get all of these weapons and more. You can get a longbow. Do you have to kill Taurus Demon to get to the longbow part? I don't think so. Or do you? Yeah, you do. Do you? Yeah, you do. Never mind. But yeah, but yeah, after the Taurus Demon, you can get the, what was I calling it? You can get the longbow straight there. And you can get a ton more weapons that I'm not even going to mention at this point. But you can get tons of weapons before you go past your third boss. In these other Souls games, not so much. I think probably Demon Souls, you have a reasonable amount of variety as well. But that's the thing, right? Because when you're playing Dark Souls, at least me personally, I like doing all of these different builds. And all these different builds require me to have access to, a weapon that supports my build early on. And I feel like Dark Souls 3 doesn't have that. Dark Souls 2 definitely didn't have that. And it frustrates me. It's very frustrating because I want to start a build and I want to instantly be able to, okay, I'll go here, get this weapon, and this weapon works for this build. Boom, done. And I know there's going to be someone in the comment section that's going to go and say, oh, but you can get this and that and the other. In my experience, guys, in Dark Souls 1 is the one where you have to put the least amount of effort into getting a starter weapon that will allow you to proceed through the rest of the game until you get your final weapon and, complete your build. And that I kind of feel is something that From Software has not noticed. And that was something that made Dark Souls 1 so special. At least, again, it's a personal opinion. You guys go to the comment sections and let's all have a discussion together about this. But yeah, that is my list. So Dark Souls 2, number 5, Demon Souls, number 4, Dark Souls 3, number 3, Bloodborne, number 2, Dark Souls 1, number 1. That's how I feel about the Souls series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment, a like, all the kinds of good stuff. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.